Today we're going to be learning about watercolor techniques. There are lots of different ways to fill in space with the colors of this watercolor paint. So let's go ahead and have some fun. One of the easiest ways to fill in a space is by using a flat wash. And what you can do is wet the area to be painted with water, and then just go in with your color that you want or colors and let that water pull the color to the edges of your shape. Sometimes though you don't want just one flat solid color. Sometimes you want that color to fade a little bit, so you use the graduated wash. Load your brush up with a lot of paint and start at the top, and as you start going down just keep adding a little bit more water to your brush as it slowly fades and goes from darker color to lighter color. Another way to change the color that's in a shape is to use what's called a variegated wash, and that's just combining two different colors. So go in just like you would with a graduated wash, where you start with more color, slowly adding more water to it as you get away from that main color, and then you start adding the other color and working the opposite direction. You can bring the colors together. You can tilt your paper in different directions to get the waters to combine and the colors to join. You can start having a little bit of fun with mixing colors when you take colors and make blooms, and basically what that is adding wet paint dots to either wet water, wet paper, or to wetted paint. As you can see, they look like explosions or sunbursts of color. This is an example of a technique called wet on dry, where you use wet paint and put it on dry paper and also dry paint. Right now the paint is drying, first layer is down, and going in with the second layer will allow your paints not to mix, but have sharp, hard edges on the lines, where they would be softer if the paper was wet. The other common way to paint is wet into wet, and that is where you put wet paint into wet paint, or put wet paint onto wet paper. You can see that the yellow paint is still wet, and as I put the blue into this shadow, that shadow softens, and so the paint then blends a little bit more smoothly. So it just depends on which kind of effect you're really going for, if you want crisp edges or softened edges. Soft edges, use wet in wet. Resist is a method where you put something down onto the paper that resists the paint, hence the clever name. So you could use a crayon or rubber cement or masking fluid, anything that will repel the water and leave the color of the paint or the color of the paper underneath. In this case, I put down white crayon and then painted over it, and you can see the effect of it, supposedly looking like a ball with a shadow on it. Maybe if you want to see it a little bit clearer and make it a definite shape, I'll just write the word resist and then paint over that so that you can see the effect maybe a little bit better. You can create shapes this way, or just enhance the highlights of your painting. Another fun method is when you put salt onto your paint. It creates really interesting patterns and shapes that you really can't control. You put the salt down after you paint. Make sure that the paint is still wet, and this really should be the last thing that you do before you set it to dry off to the side. Make sure that you let the paint dry completely before removing the salt.